that allows oil and gas to be part of the solution and allows energy companies to be part of the solutions going forward, because it can be easy to demonize and it can be easy to look at just the downside, but you also need to bear in mind the fuller picture, the broader scope of what these companies have been able to deliver. There's a lot of different aspects where fossil fuels are fundamental to be able to provide that, and we really see that. I mean, there's still over 1 billion people in this world who are living in abject poverty, who look to aspire to the kind of lifestyles that we're able to enjoy that they right now are only able to dream of. Carbon capture, utilization and storage is a huge potential where you'll be able to continue to drive the economic growth through heavy industry, but be able to capture the carbon that's coming off the back end. And now we'll be able to instead put carbon dioxide back into those same reservoirs or other reservoirs that can be very, very positive long-term storage for it. So all of these technologies allow this to progress.
Welcome back to The Swit, not just another podcast, but actually a place where we talk about the transition we want to do in order to have a joyful and great planet to live on for a long, long time. And actually we're recording in a very special place. We're at Grytsberg, a place in Sweden. So if you don't recognize the studio, you're right. We are in a very special place because we have some really special guests. I will tell you more about that soon. I hope that you are ready for today's show, and I hope that you will subscribe, comment, and make sure to participate in this conversation because we need you. You are important for us to make that transition and that switch. Well, don't worry, I do have Emil with me. He's behind the camera. Emil, game on?
Yeah, game on.
Game on. I'm happy to hear that. And of course, my friends, you will be able to share this episode because I know that you want to. So don't worry. With me, I do have the buttons, the bullshit button and the awesome button. Why? Because we want to have those like truthful, honest conversations where we really elevate or actually dare to talk about things that are not so good. Hope you're ready to join me at this great show that we have for you today. Today's guest is a very special person to me, is a person that I dearly admire and that I have the fortune to work together with. She is Barbara Harrison, and she's the brilliant VP of Offsets and Emerging at Chevron New Energies. With her strategic genius and unstoppable drive, Barbara has transformed Chevron Offsets and Emerging businesses, leading the way towards greater returns and reduced carbon emissions. She is a force to be reckoned with, having held impressive roles like General Manager of Value Chain Optimization in Asia, that was a long one, and the mastermind behind corporate strategic planning. From manufacturing to retail, Barbara has conquered it all. Shining bright like a superstar, she is here with me in the studio. Welcome, Barbara.
Oh my goodness, I feel that's a very impressive intro. Thank you, Christina.
Yeah, and very
it's
long
lovely
titles.
to be here.
I love those titles in America. They're so long. It takes me a very long time to say them.
The longer the title, the more impressive the job. That's what we always say.
So as you see, we have a very impressive person here with a lot of long titles. Welcome to Sweden, Barbara.
It is wonderful to be here. It's my first time visiting and I'm just sad I don't get to stay for longer, but it's absolutely lovely to be here.
It has been lovely to have you. Actually, yesterday you got to learn the Swedish dance, Små grodorna.
Not just learn, but participate. Yeah. Most importantly, to participate. It was quite the evening.
It was quite the evening. If you don't know what Små grodorna is, then you have to come to Sweden, especially for midsummer.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a special dance we have. But you taught us a little bit about river dancing as well.
I did. I got to participate in some Irish dancing. Nobody joined me, unfortunately, but that's what I'll have to come back to Sweden for. The next time you'll all get up an Irish dance with me. But our hosts have been fabulous. You do?
Yeah.
Perfect.
I will have to practice though before that, but I will do my absolute very best. We're here to talk about Chevron, of course. We're here to talk about all the work that you are doing in New Energies in order to do the transition. But before that, I really want to dive in to get to know you a little bit more personal. So let's see what the wheel of questions have for you, Barbara.
Exciting times.
Wheel of questions. What would you sing at karaoke nights?
Oh, that is a great question. What would I sing at karaoke night? The first song that immediately jumped into my head is American Pie. So I'm going to have to go with that, but I wish I had thought of a better Irish song to give you. But I'm going to go with Bye Bye Miss American Pie. Or maybe I should do a Tina Turner classic in remembrance of having lost her yesterday. But let's go with Bye Bye Miss American Pie.
Yeah, absolutely. Rest in peace, Tina Turner. But I think that the song you chose is a good one. Even Swedes can sing that one.
Everyone can sing along.
Everybody can sing.
And dance.
Yeah. If you would pick an Irish song, what would that be?
It would definitely be something by Christy Moore. Are you familiar with Christy Moore?
Not much. I have to.
Very traditional Irish singer, a lot of fabulous songs. Yes.
Well, that is something more to look into then and understand. Let's see if we have some more questions for you.
Wheel of questions. What did you want to be when you were a kid?
So it was not an engineer, and it was not the vice president of offsets and emerging for Chevron New Energies, shockingly. I actually wanted to be a doctor. So I had a couple of broken bones as a kid, and I thought it would be very, very cool to be an orthopedic surgeon. And so I did some research, and I learned just how long it was going to take me to be an orthopedic surgeon. And how long I would have to study for. And then I decided maybe there was another route to take. But yes, growing up, I always thought I would be a doctor.
Does that say a lot about you as a character? You're like driven, you want speed and results fast?
I'm going to say no, I think it says a lot about me of I like solving problems. And to me, orthopedics was a way to solve a problem. Somebody had a problem and you were there to fix it. I love learning. I am constantly curious. But I do like to get to the finish line a little bit faster. And 5 years of college, a few years of residency, another 5 years of specialty was just a little bit more that I wanted to put in before entering the real world.
I had the same thing, but I wanted to be a psychologist. And then I checked up how long that would have been. It was similar, so I skipped that. Skip that, good. Interesting. Do you know what more I wished to be when I was young? Guess.
Philosopher.
I wished I would have had that good answer. I wanted to be both a ballerina and a military at the same time. Interesting.
A ballerina in the military, or?
I don't know. I actually didn't figure that out. It actually says like Christina, and I wanted to be like a military ballerina.
Well, judging from your dancing skills last night, I think it was a wasted effort that you did not pursue the ballerina.
Thank you.
It would have been a gift to all of Sweden and not just the dinner companions last night.
Thank you. Smågrodorna are really impressed. I'm happy to hear that, definitely. As much as I could sit here and talk to you for hours and hours, it's time to move into vision, mission, and dreams a little bit to get to know both Chevron and also New Energies, in a sense. So the oil and gas industry has been with us for a long time, and since a decade or two back, it is changing, and it's a transition that we're going through from traditional oil and gas into new things. I wanted to start up with asking a question. Could you describe what the energy system of tomorrow should look like? What's the vision from Chevron's side?
Absolutely. So the only thing I'll say is I think oil and gas has always been in transition, right? And I think it's become very accelerated in the last decade or so. You're absolutely right. But I think this is a business that has constantly been in transition to meet the customer's needs, to meet the changes and demands from society. And that's been a really important part of what's allowed us to be a company that's been around for 140 years plus, of constantly meeting and changing those needs as society demands it. And as technology evolves, which has been a huge part of the energy transition, we see a huge need to be able to continue to deliver reliable, affordable, and ever cleaner energy. And that's fundamentally the mission behind what Chevron does every day. As we've seen over the last year, particularly pronounced, the need for that energy to be affordable and reliable is as important and very, very important. And it's part of the energy transition as we continue to move towards the ever cleaner of making sure that we're maintaining that affordability and reliability. Part of as we transition into Chevron New Energies is being able to accelerate those lower carbon solutions. How do we really accelerate that transition, lower the carbon intensity of our base operations, producing the products that we make today, while also moving into the technologies of the future that will deliver the lower carbon solutions of the future.
Let's start. I kind of see two things here. So making the things that we are already doing better. What's going on in that section?
So there's big opportunities for us to be able to support the efforts that are happening across our base business to lower our carbon intensity. We're very, very proud of our operations, and we're actually in the first quartile performance for our upstream production. So when we produce the oil and gas that we do, we're top quartile performer in terms of the lowest carbon intensity. And some of our assets are actually right at the very top of that. So the Gulf of Mexico, the Permian Basin, for instance, very, very low carbon intensity relative to some other sources of oil and gas that are available. However, we still see the need in order to be able to lower the carbon intensity. So part of that is a very focused effort around methane reduction and methane emission reduction. And we have specific targets around reducing that. But it's also around looking at the technology options that will lower the carbon intensity. And so Chevron New Energies is made up of a number of different businesses. I have the honor of leading our offsets and emerging business, but we're also focused on carbon capture, utilization and storage, and a hydrogen business. And both of those are key technology solutions that will be able to help industries, not just like Chevron and oil and gas sectors, but other very hard to abate, heavy industries that aren't going to have solutions like electrification that can be widely applied across the entire industry. So how are we able to still produce the products that we make, provide those and kind of fuel the needs of the world today, but do that in an ever cleaner way?
How do you feel? I mean, we have ourselves been driving the demand, right? So we came up with vehicles in the 19th century. All of this oil and gas and fossil fuels has been driven by us. And now it is a very strong work to finish it and to stop with that. Everything says that it's not possible to quit fossil fuels completely. Do you feel that you can do what you need in order to stand proud in the transition?
I absolutely do. I think it's oftentimes very underappreciated just how all-encompassing the energy industry is. People think of it as just powering up their car to be able to drive to the grocery store or whatever. But if you think about plastics, if you think about the rubber that the tires are made of, if you think about the entire chemical supply chain and everything else that goes into it, we could look around the road that you're driving, we could look around the room here. There's a lot of different aspects where fossil fuels are fundamental to be able to provide that. And we really see that. I mean, there's still over 1 billion people in this world who are living in abject poverty, who look to aspire to the kind of lifestyles that we're able to enjoy that they right now are only able to dream of. And so we really do see that fossil fuels will continue to play a role going into the future. However, we also absolutely acknowledge that we need to do that in an ever cleaner way. We need to be able to produce those fossil fuels with a lower carbon intensity. We need to be able to produce different and alternative fuels like renewable natural gas, renewable diesel, biodiesel. We need to continue to expand the scope of the fuels that we're producing that continue to have lower and lower carbon associated with them. But I think the idea of just being able to switch off the fossil fuel industry is one that will lead to very, very serious societal issues, right? The world relies on the energy that we produce in order to be able to drive the economy, in order to be able to both drive people around, but also drive the economy. And so we see the need to continue to be part of the fossil fuels in the future, but are very proud to be able to do that in a way with a lower carbon intensity.
Today it is at 80% fossil fuels in comparison to others. How do you project like the closest, let's say 10 to 20 years? Where will we be?
Yeah, I think what you have to look at, and I'm not going to throw out exact numbers because whenever we make projections like that, the only guarantee is that you're wrong.
Right? True that, yeah.
And so I do consider that fossil fuels on an absolute basis is not going to see the growth that we've seen in the past. But I do think you need to look at what will the total energy demand be. And as I said, with population continuing to grow and projected to grow very significantly over the next 50 years, and with more and more people aspiring to move higher up the economy ladder, which fundamentally means higher consumers of energy and a lot of the products that are made, the absolute demand for energy will grow. Now, I think so fossil fuels will continue to be a lower percentage of that total demand going forward, but will still continue to be a very, very viable part of the energy future.
What about if we move into the second part with new technologies then, and that part? How are you working to exceed that speed?
Yeah, to me, that's a really, really exciting part. So we've gotten to know each other through our partnership with Geothermal. And this is an industry, for instance, that we were very heavily involved in for over 30 years. We were one of the top suppliers of geothermal in Indonesia and Philippines. And one of the reasons why at the time we exited that business is we didn't see the potential to be able to scale and grow. And one of the big advantages that a large company like Chevron is able to bring is we're able to bring that scale. And so when we don't see the opportunity to do that, there's other players who are better equipped.
This was in the 70s and the...
Oh, no, even up until the 90s when we exited those businesses in the late 90s, exactly. But where we don't necessarily see the potential to be able to grow it, it may be a better fit for another operator to take over those assets, which is what had happened. But we're now re-entering back into geothermal, have a number of projects underway. And it really is because of those technology breakthroughs. It's conventional geothermal is very limited to, the exact right geographical conditions, the exact right geological conditions for it to be able to thrive. But new technologies are allowing you to expand the envelope of where you can apply it very, very significantly. So that's one example, but there's a lot of examples on that. Carbon capture, utilization and storage is a huge potential where you'll be able to continue to drive the economic growth through heavy industry, but be able to capture the carbon that's coming off the back end and be able to sequester it long term. And this is where we take our deep technological understanding of the subsurface and everything that's allowed us to successfully extract oil from the ground. And now we'll be able to instead put carbon dioxide back into those same reservoirs or other reservoirs that can be very, very positive long-term storage for it. So all of these technologies allow this to progress.
I'm going to give you awesome bottom there.
Wonderful.
Yes, there you go. Because I kind of like the way we're thinking here. So we have a skill, we have a skill set, we know something. How can we utilize that and use it to change?
Exactly.
Actually. So that goes both for geothermal. So everything that's subsurface, all the knowledge you have. What more knowledge does Chevron have that could be utilized in order to do the transition?
So I think one of the other things you have to look at is, we're going to rely very heavily on partners, right? Partnership is absolutely a part of our DNA. It's one of our strongest values of people, partnership, and performance, right? So we absolutely value partnership. And I see huge potential for smaller innovation companies to be able to bring forth the technologies. However, one of the huge advantages that a company like Chevron brings is, as you mentioned, deep understanding of subsurface and exploration. But one of the other areas is the ability to bring major capital projects forward. And that can both be from a financing perspective, which is very, very critical, but also an experience perspective. Do you understand all the steps that are involved in permitting and planning and cost analysis and really being able to understand what it looks like? And I think that's going to be a really, really critical aspect, because a lot of these technologies, we've had enough investment to show that they're technically feasible. And where we now see the opportunity, and it's the exciting part I get to do with the emerging businesses, how can we actually make these commercially feasible? How can we ensure that geothermal can compete with wind and solar? And when I say compete, that doesn't mean it's instead of, it's absolutely an and game. But being able to bring a company with the size and scale of Chevron, with the broad, I'd say, depth and breadth of both technical talent and project management and major capital project expertise, we have the opportunity to be able to grow and scale these technologies so they're price competitive, which will allow the further and further investment to occur. And as I said, total energy demand is only going up. I'm not willing to put numbers behind it, but I absolutely project that total energy demand will go up. And so we're going to need all of the solutions, and being able to bring those forward is something that I'm really proud of.
What do you think are the biggest opportunities for lowering carbon right now and in the future?
So I think I'll focus on where we're looking at, but I'll be completely honest. There's lots of different areas, right? There's a lot of players who are continuing to invest in wind and solar. Offshore wind presents tremendous opportunity. They're not areas that we've looked to explore. And it's not because we don't think they bring value. It's not because we don't see them as very, very valuable parts of the energy mix. It's just not somewhere that we necessarily bring either the capabilities or the assets to be able to drive them forward. So where we stood up New Energies and we focused on carbon capture, utilization and storage, hydrogen, and then offsets and emerging, it's really where can we bring our capabilities, where can we apply our assets, or where can we apply our customer relationships to be able to really drive technologies forward. And what we see is electrification is going to be a fantastic solution. It will be applied in a lot of our businesses, but in very heavy industry, in those hard to abate sectors that are very energy intensive, we're going to have to provide different solutions. So carbon capture is one, but hydrogen is another potential, right? You could look to be hydrogen firing versus firing off typical natural gas, which instead of then producing CO2 out of the back end is essentially producing steam or H2O. So that's your little organic chemistry lesson for the day, right? So we see this is a huge opportunity. Chevron's been involved in the hydrogen game for a long time. All of our downstream facilities where I started my career produce hydrogen and utilize hydrogen as part of their processes. But we see being able to expand that even further. And you pair up hydrogen production with CCUS to be able to produce what's called blue hydrogen, or you potentially use renewable power to be able to produce hydrogen and produce green hydrogen. And now you're able to dramatically lower the carbon footprint of some of the operations that we already do today with technology from today expanded into the future.
New Energies is still a smaller part of Chevron. Do you see growth coming in New Energies and also in your area? Do you think that that is going to be bigger and bigger? How do you project that?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was one of the critical parts as we stood up New Energy. So as I said, Chevron's been part of the energy transition basically since we started, right? It's an industry that is constantly changing. But about 2 years ago at this stage, there was a recognition that that transition was not occurring fast enough. That if left kind of as individual businesses, there was a lot of competing drivers, and the ability to be able to drive that transition at the scale and the speed that we as an organization, as an enterprise wanted to see was not happening. And that was essentially the genesis of why Chevron New Energies was born. It was really to be able to accelerate these lower carbon solutions that we see going forward. And so that's been an absolutely critical aspect. And then, as you say, part of standing up a new organization is, first of all, you bring that critical mass of folks together who are focused on one thing and not, distracted with focusing on energy transition while still delivering the energy products that we need today. Another critical aspect that we did that I've been very, very grateful for is to assign capital spend that will go into the Chevron New Energies, and that's CCUS, hydrogen, offsets and emerging and renewable fuels. And at the time we committed
how much?
At least $10 billion. So we said at least $10 billion over the next 5 years, which brings us to 2028, and we'll continue to evaluate if that's the right spend. But we dedicated this capital, and the great part for us is, first of all, it means we're not having to make those decisions of, do we continue to explore? Do we continue to develop the Permian Basin? Or do we look at developing CCUS, right? It's dedicated capital that we're focused on. And it really is a recognition that we need to be making those investments now to be able to grow those businesses into being a hugely viable part of our Chevron's total enterprise for decades and decades to come, that we need to have that concentrated capital now. And so I do think that's been a big part of it. First of all, you bring together the people, the expertise, the mission around one thing, which is really helping to drive that energy transition. And then you also back it up with very real and very tangible $10 billion, which in a company for Chevron is a very significant amount of money. And
for any company.
For any company is, right? And so that's become a really critical aspect of it, of not only do you bring the expertise together, but then you back it with hard dollars to be able to back that up.
I've been following Chevron New Energies now for 3 years, and since about 6 months back, we're in partnership as well in a JV in the States. It's pretty interesting to see the difference between Chevron and Chevron New Energies. In Chevron New Energies, you have very high speed, there are things happening, there's progress moving forward. How is it to be, it's like you're a startup in a huge company in a sense. Do you collaborate?
We do, no, but it's exactly right. And that's how we're very focused from the get-go. And it's been one of the exciting leadership challenges for me I mean, I've spent my whole career working within a very large corporation, right? 40,000 people. There's a ton of things that we do incredibly well, but we wouldn't necessarily be known for speed and agility and quick decision making. And we've made lots of steps forward, but it was part of, as we talked about, the value of standing up Chevron New Energies is a much smaller segment within a larger enterprise. We're given our own capital budget to then be able to prioritize where we spend those dollars. And it has been a focus from the very get-go as we stood up on being much more agile in our decision making, on being much more quick in our decision making. A part of that is also a recognition of this part of the energy transition is moving quickly. And if we're not able to move quickly with it, we won't get to be a part of it. So it's absolutely critical for us that we're able to really make decisions quickly. We're able to reprioritize. And the other aspect is a lot of these technologies, as I said, they may work on paper, but we need to make sure they can actually work in a commercial setting, that they can be competitive, that they are able to, in the long term, deliver the returns to be able to compete as part of our base business and be able to return value back to shareholders. And so we need to be able to constantly adjust and be able to understand what's happening in the external landscape and where we should be shifting our investment. A good example, for instance, is the passing of the Inflation Reduction Act or the IRA in the US, right? It didn't change our strategy, but it did allow us to sort of stand back and reevaluate and say, are we spending money in the right places? Do we have the policy enablement in order to allow us to kind of invest these early dollars with much, much lower returns, but with an eye towards being able to deliver the returns we need to deliver in the long run. So we acknowledge in the early years, we're not going to be able to be competitive in double-digit returns on these technologies. But if we don't make the investments today, we're never going to get there. And that's the critical part. We need to be making those investments today to be able to build the scale, to be able to support the growth that will allow us to get there in the long term.
Maybe it's pretty early still, but what do you consider being the greatest achievements, both at New Energies and also, I mean, in your organization so far?
So I'm going to answer this probably how you completely unexpect. It's actually my team. I've managed to bring together this fabulous team of people that are not just driven by intellect and intelligence, but also by passion and purpose. And I think the culture that we have within our team, the honesty, the integrity, the trust that exists, when I look at the leaders that I have as part of my organization and how they engage with their team, it's such a tremendous source of pride to me. And so, like I said, I've worked my entire career as part of a large organization, and the opportunity to sort of stand out and say, okay, no, we're going to build something from scratch. You don't get that a lot of times in big organizations. And to be able to do that and build not just, okay, here's a strategy for the business, but here's how I want a team to function. Here's how I want us to work together. Here's how I want us to make decisions. Here's how I want us to communicate and be able to engage with each other on a day-to-day basis. All of that has been, quite honestly, the biggest source of pride for me over the last couple of years.
I understand that your team is amazing. What are the dreams of your team and you for
to change the world?
Forward? Tell us more. Please tell me more.
Nothing bigger or smaller than that. No, I mean, it is. It's the God honest truth, right? I mean, I've talked before about the value that we're going to see in partnership. And I mean, as part of both our Chevron technology ventures and our investment in early technology companies, and then as part of our emerging business, to be able to take those technologies and bring them to size and scale, it's absolutely critical. We're going to continue to need those technology advancements, either happening within the company or happening outside of it. But if I look at our partnership, for example, right?
Meaning Baseload Capital and the Chevron New
exactly,
Energies.
Baseload Capital and Chevron New Energies. Baseload Capital is able to do fantastic things, but don't necessarily have the number of people behind it, don't necessarily have that ability to grow at the rate we're able to grow, that over time, you have the potential to change the world. But I think you bring a company of our size and scale behind it, and together, that's actually a real possibility. Like, we could fundamentally change what the energy mix looks like 10, 20 years from now. And I mean, if that doesn't get you out of bed in the morning, I don't think anything ever will.
It really gets me out of bed.
Even in a morning like this.
Let's dive into geothermal a little bit more. Your projection of geothermal What do you see coming?
So right now, geothermal is still a relatively small part of the total energy mix, right? It's less than 20 gigawatts worldwide. And what we see happening is, first of all, there's been massively increased investment, interest in geothermal. And one of the critical parts of that is it provides real alternative to other renewable power sources. Wind and solar, as I mentioned, absolutely are going to be a part of the energy mix. It's been fantastic to see the rate of growth that have occurred in both of those industries over the last couple of decades. So one of the huge advantages, though, that we see from geothermal is it's available 24/7. The heat is always there. It's a natural resource. It is constantly re-energizing itself, so to speak. And so unlike wind and solar, which is reliant on either the wind blowing or the sun shining, which even in the most perfect optimal conditions is not going to happen 24 hours a day, geothermal can be available 24 hours a day. And so as we look at renewable power as being a true kind of game changer in terms of electrification happening at a lower carbon intensity, we see geothermal as having huge potential opportunity there. The other big aspect of it is it is below the subsurface. So unlike wind and solar, which either for solar has a very large surface footprint in order to be able to install solar panels, or for wind, which has had the kind of NIMBY issues, right? Everyone wants wind power, but they don't want a large turbine in their backyard. The surface footprint of geothermal is much, much smaller compared to those. And so what we've seen now is when you add in both the kind of fundamental advantages of geothermal as a renewable power source, and then put on top of that the sweetener of the technology advancements that will actually allow it to be potentially applied in a lot more geographies, we see it as having huge potential to be able to scale and grow. So if you just look at sort of applying with the current technologies that we have today, but then you take it and say, okay, we apply these new technologies, I mean, there's potential to go to 30, 40 times the kind of size of the geothermal mix that we have today. Now, that's going to require investment. It's going to require the policy enablement to allow that investment to occur in the early stages, just like we had for wind and solar. But certainly the potential is there to be able to grow very, very significantly.
How fast do you think it will grow?
So what we're pursuing right now is what we're calling a pilots to projects approach, right? So we've got a number of different partnerships. So we're working with baseload very closely in the United States. We've got opportunities in Indonesia, opportunities in Japan. And what we're doing is in each of these different areas, looking at applying the different technologies and really, first of all, understanding from a technical consideration, what do we need to really be looking at? Also from a commercial consideration, what are we going to be able to get for that power in the markets? How are we going to be able to produce it? What are going to be the costs? Where are we going to need to drive costs down? Where are we going to need to de-risk the technology, be that in the technologies or the subsurface? If you look at it, right, there's tens of thousands of oil and gas wells that are drilled every year and a few hundred geothermal wells, right? So there is huge potential for learning to occur as we continue to invest and continue to make more projects into reality that then will allow us to grow and scale it.
Geothermal historically didn't make it. As you said, it's still a small part. What do you think they need to do differently in order to succeed now?
So I do think, I mean, so I'll give the geothermal 101, and I am not a geologist. This is not my area of technical expertise, but there's a few basic principles that you need to have occurring for geothermal to be able to occur, right? You need to have the heat available to you, right? So you need to have a minimum heat that's available. You need to have the permeability in the rock, and then you need to have a fluid. And so traditionally that only occurred in kind of large volcanic regions around the Pacific Ring of Fire. So you were very geographically constrained of where this was a real viable resource. And that fundamentally led to a less interest in investment that occurred in the past. With these new technologies, for instance, if you look at advanced closed loop technology, where think of it as essentially putting a radiator under the ground. So you remove the issue. If you've got the heat, but you don't have the fluid, you can put this in and put in a contained system that brings the fluid through the rock. So still allows that heat transfer to occur, but within a contained system and not within the fluid. Or you look at EGS or enhanced geothermal systems, which allows you to create that that permeability in the same way we've been able to massively expand the US production of oil and gas, you would be able to really expand the envelope for where geothermal may be an option. And to me, that is the real game changer. If we can take these technologies, be able to prove them in the field, be able to de-risk them, to be able to drive the costs down through both scale and investment and early policy support, that will really allow us to grow geothermal. And we see huge potential for that to be able to then to be able to lower the carbon intensity of our base operations, to be able to tie it into a much larger value chain, right? Hydrogen, CCUS, great opportunities in the future, but power intensive in and of themselves. And so if you can tie geothermal into those other lower carbon energy solutions and create that entire value chain, that's where we really see as a game changer in being able to bring this forward.
How do you envision the future relationships between oil and gas and geothermal?
I think it's only going to continue to grow, right? There's aspects, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, there's strengths that our organization is going to bring, and there's massive strengths that other organizations are going to continue to bring. But fundamentally, the oil and gas industry has spent centuries of understanding subsurface, being able to drill successfully, being able to drive costs down, being able to bring major capital projects to the fore. All of those are fundamental to allowing geothermal to continue to grow. And so I see this as being a critical enabler of an entire industry continuing to grow around it. But like in many aspects, and no different than in oil and gas, it will be developed through partnership with different companies.
That sounds good, because that means that you might come back for midsummer and we can really do the frog dance.
I will be practicing at home in between now and then.
And I will be practicing the river dance as well. Thank you. It's time to move into the future.
Wonderful.
We are getting questions from our kids. And we have a question that is posed directly to you. Let's take a look.
Questions from our future.
Who should pay from the better world?
Wow. I'm very impressed with the kids of the future. They even think to ask that question. It's going to be a really interesting challenge of the future. And quite honestly, as we look at delivering the energy of the future, as I said, it's reliable, it's affordable, and it's ever cleaner. And I do think one of those critical aspects is we need to make sure that as we deliver these energy solutions, they remain affordable for customers. And so doing a massive transition that would require huge spikes in energy prices is not something that is going to be viable. It's not going to actually support in the long term the kind of change that we need to be able to see. And so I do think the investment is going to need to come from private enterprise. The policy support is going to need to come through governments to allow these new technologies to be able to grow. That's not a long-term solution, but in the early stages to spur the kind of investment that's going to be needed to allow these industries to grow and scale is going to be really important. And then consumers are going to be a part of it as well. But I think it's going to be making sure that that balance is hit correctly so it doesn't become overly burdensome, particularly on the end consumer. But it is then also borne by both governments and private enterprise in spurring that investment to allow us to deliver those, as I said, reliable, affordable, ever cleaner energy solutions.
Kids, in Sweden right now, there is a trial where they are actually suing the Swedish government for not taking care of our future, in a sense. Do you consider that it is our fault, like the older generations, or how do you think on the topic of blame when it comes to where we are today?
Yeah, the topic of blame is always an interesting one to me because I don't think, for the most part, right, and it was very rare that was nefarious drivers behind this, right? So just as you made decisions about your everyday life and everyone around you made decisions about their everyday life, what they considered as the most critical aspects when making those decisions has shifted over time. And I think there's a much higher awareness today that some of those decisions that may have been made in the past may have had short-term gain, but really had long-term impact that was not well understood at the time. And I think the massive change that has occurred, and why I love this idea of kids asking the questions, is the level of awareness that exists around kids today is just fundamentally different than where you and I were. I mean,
Definitely.
I would never have had the wherewithal or aptitude to ask the question if I was 8 or 10 of who should pay for energy transition. It just wasn't even part of my lexicon. It wasn't even part of my consideration. And so I think it's difficult to blame any individual or any enterprise or any government because it was not made with malintent at the time. The decisions that were not made with malintent. But I do also think it's incumbent on us now. We do know better. We do have better science. We do have better technology. We do have better solutions. And so rather than looking back and assigning blame, to me, I'm far more interested in looking forward and looking for solutions.
I think that the future is bright as long as we have those kind of kids that are asking these kind of questions, definitely. An important segment for us is also to discuss things that are uncomfortable, the elephant in the room.
Uncomfortable conversations.
The question that has been posed here is that can oil and gas overcome their interest in maintenance of the fossil fuels and really move into doing the transition? What are your thoughts on that one?
I think it's going to be a very challenging world where we try to talk about one solution being right and one solution being wrong. As I've talked about over the course of the podcast, we see and continue to see that fossil fuels are going to be part of the energy landscape in the future. And I'm actually unapologetic about that. I think that the value that the world gets from the energy that we produce every day is something that fundamentally helps to drive human progress. But as I said, we also absolutely recognize that we need to continue to deliver that in a lower carbon intensity and a lower carbon way going forward. And so I think that's where it's going to be really, really critical that we continue to have an environment that allows oil and gas to be part of the solution and allows energy companies to be part of the solutions going forward, because it can be easy to demonize and it can easy to look at just the downside, but you also need to bear in mind the fuller picture, the broader scope of what these companies have been able to deliver for the world. I mean, there's a reason that I'm here in Sweden today, and there's a reason I was in Iceland yesterday, and that was facilitated through an airplane flight, right, which was powered by aviation fuel. And it's been a tremendous opportunity for us to be able to connect. It's been a tremendous opportunity for me to be able to get out there and see geothermal operations in action, to really be able to deepen the partnership that we have through our companies. But if you sort of say, hey, oil and gas can't be part of that, then I would have never gotten on that plane, right? And that's where we need to continue. And sustainable aviation fuel will be part of that solution in the future. And we're excited to be a part of that, of delivering that in the future. And I think that's where oil and gas companies will meet the needs of today and continue to meet the needs of tomorrow. But demonizing them or trying to exclude them from the conversation or exclude energy companies from being part of the solution is not going to allow for the continued human progress that we've been able to deliver over the last centuries that we've been in operation.
Can you get tired of this kind of questions? I mean, is it an awareness problem about, do we not know better than to ask and pose this question over and over again?
No, I don't think so, actually. And I honestly think the fact that somebody is asking that question, and whether you're asking it in this format or whether it's a conversation I'm having at a dinner party, means that person is interested enough to want to learn and grow. And I'm never going to get tired of being able to have the conversation with somebody that is genuinely interested in hearing the answer and actually open to hearing what you're going to say. I will say, yeah, it's frustrating to have people paint a picture that doesn't actually fully represent our industry, or take a very small snippet and have that represent an entire industry. That's also always going to be tiresome for people. But if I'm having a conversation with someone or engaged in a debate or in a topic with somebody who's part of a different industry or part of a, solely focused on renewable power, etc., and there's a genuine interest to learn and an interest to see how we can partner together, to me, that's a huge opportunity, not a frustration.
When we were discussing yesterday, you told me about methane and cows and how that is changing. It's a good example of how we have a picture of how the world works, but facts actually don't come to the table in a sense. We don't know really. Can you tell me about the example with the cows and the methane and that part?
Yeah, so only us are having these kind of dinner conversations as we're enjoying our dinner and talking about methane production from cows. But what I was helping to explain is an awful lot of times the oil and gas industry is kind of highlighted for our carbon emissions. And that's real and it's true. And we're working to be able to address that. But there's also a huge amount of emissions from other industries that are not necessarily as commonly aware for people generally. And so we were talking about the agricultural industry and in particular the methane production from cows. And not to get too crude, I might get the bullshit button very appropriately
you can
here
do
on
that,
this
please.
But the production from cows is a huge source of methane, and methane is 16 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. And so one of the areas that we're very proud to be participating is in renewable natural gas. And essentially what that is capturing that methane production and then turning that into a natural gas product, which is a direct substitute for traditional natural gas that would come from oil and gas industry. But it is one of those areas where, as we talked about earlier, there's lots of focus on the oil and gas industry, but it's really incumbent upon us to look across all of society and say, where are we able to make the changes? And I think that's where I'm really excited, as we talked about earlier, questions from kids. They're interested in learning and growing and understanding the carbon footprint of the food choices they make and, the growth of farm to table and all the rest. That has a real impact, not just in the quality of food that you may be eating, but fundamentally in the carbon footprint of the life that you're living.
Yeah. So what would happen if we would generally raise awareness about all the choices that we make in life? It's like the car, the way we're living, what we're eating. Do you think that is an important part to discuss?
I think it is. I mean, I think this comes back to the conversation we had earlier. It's like, I'm not in a position to put blame on people for choices that they made in the past when they didn't have the information available to them. But a lot of that information is very available to people today. And so I do think it's really important to make those very conscious decisions of, do I drive? Do I purchase an electric vehicle? If I purchase an electric vehicle, where is my power coming from, right? How is my grid powered that's going to be used to charge that electric vehicle? All of that goes into, we talk about it's like life cycle analysis, but really understanding the full life cycle of the choices that you make and the carbon footprint that they have. And with the amount of information that is available to us today, the average consumer is in a much, much stronger position to be able to make those choices for themselves. And it's going to be very difficult for anybody to go truly carbon neutral. That's why we're developing our offsets business, because we recognize that there's only so much both industry and individuals are going to be able to do. And so helping to either remove carbon from the atmosphere through removal projects or avoid carbon being released through other projects is going to be an important part of the mix. But the great thing is today, people have the option to be able to make those conscious choices and to be able to choose to partner with different companies of where they shop, where they eat, how they fly, etc. That really is able to understand what their footprint is and be able to live a life that they're very comfortable with and be able to consciously make those decisions in a way that they weren't necessarily able to do even 5-10 years ago.
Amazing. I kind of wanted to ask this question as we're finishing up this, because I think that the work that you're also doing in awareness is quite interesting. For example, we have a project where we have a book together, even,
yes,
talking about renewables, geothermal, and other energy sources. In a sense, what do you think, like an impact like that can make for?
Okay, so you get all the credit for the book. I don't get to take any credit. I just help to spread it out through our showcase at Zero Week. But I think what's amazing about that is it's designed for kids, right? And if we're going to continue to change the conversation, and this is why I'm an eternal optimist just naturally, but I really genuinely feel optimistic about this, is if you put that information in the hands of kids, they now understand the impact around carbon footprint, they understand the choices that they make, and you then bring to them the awareness around geothermal and other renewable sources. I can't wait to see what the world's going to deliver when that 8-year-old who's reading the book today is suddenly a 28-year-old PhD, chemist or geologist or geophysicist, and what they're going to be able to bring to the world. So I think things like that, it's helping people to understand what an alternative future can look like and then putting the passion behind it to be able to deliver it. I mean, fundamentally, we're a company that solves problems, right? We solve big, complex problems every day to bring the energy needs of the future. And you now get a whole new generation that thinks about these problems differently and thinks of new problems to solve that we haven't even thought of yet. That's a fantastic world we're going to live in.
That is a fantastic world we're going to live in. On that note, we are ending. We could continue forever, right? But I just wanted to ask you, we've had an interesting conversation. We've talked about different ways. What are your thoughts? What do you bring with you from today's conversation?
You know, the fact that we're having this conversation is what's so important to me, right? The fact that there's people out there that are interested to tune in and subscribe to The Switch, right? That they're actually interested in learning more, expanding their horizon, thinking about the world differently. That's what we're going to take, right? There is fantastically smart people in every different aspect of industry, and you bring those minds together around solving what is fundamentally one of the greatest problems and challenges that we face today. You bring those inquiring minds together with an interest to learn and then solve. That's what's exciting to me about today's conversation. That and just getting to spend another hour chatting with you.
That's good. As the last thing here, we get to give sunshine.
Ooh.
So sunshine is someone when you want to elevate or you want to tell about something you're proud about or something like that. Who would you like to give sunshine to if you had the opportunity?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. I'm going to give sunshine to all of Baseload. How about that?
Wow.
We got to spend the
This is not paid for, by the way.
No, I am. I mean, I'm really proud of the partnerships that we've been able to form, but I'm particularly excited about this one. We had a fantastic opportunity to visit your operations in Iceland over the last couple of days and learn more about that and see exactly what's in practice as we look to be able to implement that in the US as well. And I think it's this innovative mind, Baseload Capital, with just this passion and mission around sustainability and driving investment in companies that are fundamentally going to change the future. I think that's hugely, hugely important to be able to bring then that technology and development forward. And so I'm going to cast sunshine on Alex and Magnus and Christina and all the folks. I'm not going to name everyone. I'll get in trouble if I try to drop names. But I'm going to shine sunshine on Baseload and our partnership and the excitement I have for it going forward.
Well, I gladly bring that sunshine with me back to the team. And I also know that if you want to go fast, you should go alone. But if you want to go far, we should go together.
Absolutely.
So very happy about that relationship.
Let's do both.
And the collaboration. Let's do both. Let's go fast and far.
Together.
I like that actually. And I hope that you also want to go fast and far, because that's what we actually need. Thank you very much,
Thanks
Barbara,
for having me.
for coming here, joining us here in beautiful Grytsberg and joining us at The Switch. I hope that you who listened to this episode really learned as much as I did. I hope that you bring this with you, and I'm really hoping that you will share this to someone who can take a part of the transition we need to do. So until we meet again, take care, be good, take care of yourself, and if you can, someone else. See ya.